On today's episode of Perched on the Porch, here's a question for moms. Do you see yourselves in your daughter or daughters? And if you do, in what way do you see yourself in your daughters? And I want to talk about how the way that I see myself in my daughter. And I think because at such a young age, I left my home, my parents, my country of origin, and moved to the United States at 13. And so I was traversing terrains that nobody in my family had ever done. And I don't think I even understood the magnitude of that and what that said about me as a young person into an adult. Before my daughter went off to college, her and I had a very, very contentious relationship. She was becoming a young woman, and I lived a lot of my life for my mother's approval. And I somehow internalized that for my children as well, all while trying to raise independently minded children, but still needing them to respond to me in the way that I was raised to respond to my mother, which was absolute respect without any relationship that warranted that respect. Listen to me again. I was requiring from my children absolute respect without cultivating a relationship that warranted that level of respect, because I grew up in a time where your parents didn't have to do anything. You just gave them respect because they were your parents. And those of us who were raising young people, particularly Gen Z, who were trying to raise our children differently, right? To give them a little bit more autonomy, to give them the ability to disagree with us. That when you raise children that way, or when your goal is to raise open-minded children, or children who find the beat of their own drum and march to it versus the drum that you and your culture wants for them, that there are going to be some butting heads. And so my daughter and I, as she was becoming a young woman, we were in a very, very contentious relationship. And I think had she not left home and went away to college, where she was on her own and learning to navigate life as a young person by herself, having to find a job, go to school, and she didn't have to find a job. That was not a requirement, but she wanted a job because she's a Virgo. Virgos like working, they like their own stuff, and they don't really like solely depending on anybody, not even their parents. Virgos are very much that way. But had she not gone away, I think the relationship that we are building now would not be possible. Would not be possible. And when I look at her, the way that I see myself in her is I was a very strong-willed, strong-minded young woman, right? You have to be to go to your parents and say, I want to move to another country at 13 and I don't want to live with you anymore. I want to live with a cousin whom I had never met before, but I'm going to take this chance at 13 and go into a foreign land and do this thing. And you have to be strong-willed to convince Caribbean parents to decide on that. And I think my mother probably said yes, because during that time, I was becoming a very contentious teenager myself. And my mother had raised 7 children. She probably needed the break from me, right? Like I was always a strong-willed child. And I see that in my daughter. But the other thing that I see in my daughter, she came back on Thursday night. And, she has her bedroom here at home. And Thursday night, Friday night, and Saturday night, because she left this morning for Guatemala for her mission trip with her school, she got into bed to sleep with me. And I remember I would have times with my mom where I needed to feel close to her. And one of the ways that I would try to feel close or try to get close is to be near her physically. Because sometimes, and I didn't have the language, even as a young woman, I didn't have the language because the way my mother raised me was to do everything for her children, but to be somewhat emotionally detached from us. So we knew my mother loved us in the way that she provided for us and the way that she took care of us. If something was happening, Inez was going to make a way, baby, out of no way to get what we needed. And so I'm kind of that same parent. I will make a way out of no way to get what my children needs. And although I am still emotionally closer to them than my mother ever was to us growing up, I recognize that there's an emotional distance between us. And so the way that I would try to get close to my mom was to be physically in her presence. And watching my daughter come home and crawl in bed with me 3 nights, it immediately registered to me emotionally that this was her way of trying to get close to me, not just emotionally, but using that physical act of saying, I want to be closer to you emotionally. And last night, because she always does this, whenever she's mean, and I also see her behaviors with me. I'm very last minute. I pack everything at the last minute. My daughter was the same way. And so last night we were up till almost midnight because she was going through my closet. Mom, I need a dress for this. I need jeans for that. I need a shirt for that. We're doing this. So she was driving me crazy because I'd say, try this on. Oh, I don't like that. Put this together. I don't like it that way. It was just a struggle with her last night. But when we finally went to bed and she got up this morning, I'm like, she is the version of me that wants to be emotionally close to her mom, her parent. I've always wanted that. And I was. My mom and I were close. And I think my daughter and I are close, even in ways that she doesn't recognize yet. But wanting to be close to my mom in the way that my daughter wants to be close to me. Challenging my mom in the way that my daughter challenges me. Loving and caring about my mom in the way that my daughter loves and cares about me. And charting her own course in the way that I did. Like there's so many things. And I know that she can't appreciate that she's a lot like me because she's a Virgo. They like to think that they all of their wisdom, knowledge. They like to think that they just came onto the planet being these fabulous human beings and that nobody around them had any hand in it. Because she'll tell you, oh, she really believes she is the kind, empathetic, caring child, young woman, human that she is, purely by herself. Me and her father had no influence on it. That's Virgos. But yeah, I was thinking about this while I was sitting here perched on the porch as her dad took her to the airport, that I see so much of myself in her. And I don't know if she sees any of herself in me yet, because I couldn't see it in my mom. Like, now that my mom is gone, I see so much of myself in my mom, in the way that I mother my children, in the way that I love them, in the way that I nag them, in the way that I still think I know the best way forward for them, but in the way that I would lay down my whole life for my children, that I would give anything for them to be happy. You know, that saying, you're only as happy as your saddest child. And whenever any of my children are feeling sadness, it feels like a weighted blanket on my chest. And I'm not happy. I'm not excited in the world until I could see spark come back in them. And so my mother was the same way. And yeah, that's the way that I see my daughter and myself. If you have a daughter or even a son, how do you see your children reflected back to you? What does that look like for you? Thank you for joining me on another episode of Being Perched on the Porch.